Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to another Legends of Runeterra deck tech. Time to bring you the first new potential top deck after the balance changes, and yeah, it's a pretty cool one. I've been really enjoying it and doing really well with it, and I think it's most likely going to be a tier 1 deck going forward. So before we dive into the deck, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to turn on notifications to not miss out on future content, and let me briefly show you today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, one of the leading virtual private network providers out there. A virtual private network keeps your data secure and yourself anonymous while using the internet. NordVPN comes with super fast servers, allows you to unlock your favorite entertainment websites like Netflix. They provide a 30-day money-back guarantee. They also have an included cybersecurity suite, which acts as an ad blocker to boot. They don't lock any of your data, provide a 24/7 customer support, and you can use it on up to 6 simultaneous connections, so one account covers most or all of your electronic devices. And most importantly, they don't have any bandwidth limit, so you can use it non-stop without it getting throttled, which is particularly important for heavy users like us. It also won multiple awards and comes highly recommended by top technology experts. So if you're still surfing online without a VPN, now is the time to change that. Get NordVPN now, 70% off for a 3-year plan, including 1 month extra for free using the code ManuS or the personalized link in the description down below. And now on to today's content. Alright, now that we got that out of the way, let's dive into the deck. So the deck is Ezreal Twisted Fate, or as I have saved it, Sexy Rexy, because it's honestly really just a Riptide Rex deck, and probably a better one than the sort of Misfortune Sejuani deck. But Riptide Rex is really the star of the deck, but we'll get into that in a moment once we get to it. So a few things up front that I think are pretty important with this deck is, first of all, this deck is actually a pretty bad Ezreal deck. So sure, the deck is very good at leveling Ezreal, but it's very bad at killing people with Ezreal. Deck has a lot of units and fairly few spells relative to other Ezreal decks. If you look at it, it has way more units than spells. If you look at something like Karma Ezreal, that has like 12 to 15 units, usually around 15-ish, and one of them generates spells, the other one draws a card, and Karma, one of the champions, also generates spells either literally or by copying your spells. So 3 of your 5 units basically still help your Ezreal kill the opponent, and one of the other 2 units is Ezreal. So there's really only one unit that doesn't synergize with Ezreal, which is Eye of the Dragon. This deck, however, it's pretty different. Ezreal in this deck is actually more of a scare card. It's a card that the opponent thinks is a big threat, so they will always aggressively kill him, and he's actually just a pretty good unit. The deck has a much different playstyle than most Ezreal decks. It's not the kind of like combo control deck where you just sort of try to level up your Ezreal, delay the opponent as much as possible, not die, then drop Ezreal and kill them. Since this deck neither has Karma nor Progress Day. Basically all Ezreal decks that don't have Karma and plan on being primarily an Ezreal deck and killing with Ezreal have Progress Day usually, in order to actually have enough resources to both level up Ezreal and then still have enough spells to kill the opponent. The other thing is, they also obviously have a lot fewer units. Even like something like Freeze Ezreal back in the day had like what? A 2-drop that cycled, a 2-drop that helped your Ezreal, and then like a 3-drop that helped level your Ezreal and also helped control the board. So it was sort of still a spell in the sense that it at least helped Ezreal level. So if you can use units to progress Ezreal level, you can hold spells. So units that help advance Ezreal's level up sort of don't really count towards the unit count, because for the leveling up part they are spells in a way, which means you can keep your actual spells for your Ezreal kill later more likely. And then they had like Chump Wump and the Elnuks, and without the Elnuks later they had fewer units. So they also still, while having a decent amount of units, still had only effectively like 6 real units. The rest was either replacing itself by drawing a card, which means you have a high chance of drawing into a spell, generates a spell in case of Jump Wamp. So it's only really the like 6 Elnuks and Ezreal that weren't really like helping Ezreal to level up or kill the opponent. This deck, most of the units actually neither help Ezreal level up nor kill the opponent. Except for, I guess, Grifter, which generates a warning shot, which helps a bit with the Ezreal killing part, but that's not going to be enough. All the other, and I guess Riptide Rex sort of helps with leveling the Ezreal in a way, but yeah. It happens so late that it isn't really relevant in the sense that it doesn't allow you to save spells, because in order to get there you need to aggressively use your spell interaction to not die. But it makes leveling Ezreal easier, and killing people, and all the things basically. Rex is amazing. But yeah, keep in mind, in this deck, Ezreal is more of a good unit than a primary win condition. But a 3-cost 1/3 elusive that has the potential to deal extra damage later and gives you a free Mystic Shot every time you hit the opponent with it is still really good, especially in a deck like this that sort of tries to control the board, kill its opponent's stuff, sort of grind them out while damaging them. So it's actually still a pretty good unit, which is why it's still in here, but there is a world where it might make sense to sort of consider testing something like Vi or Gangplank instead. Gangplank would have the upside of reducing your P and Z card count, making your Grifters better, but so far I haven't tested either of the two yet, and the thing is, Ezreal still scares the opponent, sometimes it still randomly wins the game in certain situations and matchups, and it's also never bad. Its spell is good and the unit itself is actually good, so there isn't really a reason to cut it, even though it's not a very good like win condition in the deck. Getting Mystic Shots every turn is still sort of a win condition in itself, so that's why I stuck with it. But yeah, if you want to experiment, you could try Vi or Gangplank. The problem with Gangplank is the deck isn't that great at leveling Gangplank the way it is built. Like, you could use some of the stuff more aggressively to help level him, and it would be okay, but it wouldn't be like an ideal Gangplank deck. It wouldn't be a deck built to level up Gangplank. It would be more like a deck where Gangplank can level up reasonably well, especially later in the game, but on turn 5 the deck will almost never play him leveled, and he will only probably have like some progress by then. And Vi, yeah, she's similarly good. She doesn't have the issue that I mentioned, and she helps with board control, so Vi might be a better fit. The main appeal of Gangplank, honestly, I think, is that he gives you a Keck, which can be nice, and that he is a Bilgewater card in a deck with an Allegiance card. Drifter is the one Allegiance card you can get away with running more like non-Allegiance cards in your deck in certain decks, because the deck isn't super dependent on the Allegiance triggering, but it's still something you want to like maximize as much as possible. Like, you don't want to give up on good necessary P&Z cards like Static Shock, Ezreal, Mystic Shot, or Beam, but you don't want to play like unnecessary P&Z cards. So third Static Shock, if not necessary, better be left out. And I've seen people play cards like Chempunk, which I would absolutely recommend against. The card is just like, I mean, it's obviously like a solid 2-drop, but the deck doesn't really care about it too much, and it's not good enough to make up for the opportunity cost of making your Grifter worth. Like, the deck just doesn't actively need it. It's a card that's fine to run if it doesn't hurt your deck, but if it makes your Yordle Grifter worse, it's not good enough or needed enough in the deck to put in the deck instead. Like, Deckhand and Black Market Merchant are just fine. Similar case, basically, with stuff like Zonite Urchin or Sump Dredger. I've seen people play those. Can't recommend it. I think it's pretty bad. Why would I want a 1-cost 2/1 in the deck? The deck has like no discard payoff, so I'm really just looting away a card that I think or hope I don't need. And to be fair, I rarely find myself having cards that I don't want or don't need. So I'm basically just cycling away cards that are fine to hopefully draw into something a bit better, which is barely any value. So if the looting part has so little value, and looting in general is worse in this game than in a game like Magic, where you have excess lands that you can loot away. You're basically just putting a 2/1 in your deck, which isn't great. The only thing that kind of matters is that it can be nice for like Twisted Fate, but I rather play something like Black Market Merchant than like Urchin. Same for some Dredger, really. Deck already has enough 3s, doesn't really want another 3, and 4/3 is like nice. It's like solid stats in an offensive deck. But in a deck like this, you really don't care. And like I said, the looting effect doesn't really do a whole lot other than sometimes help with Twisted Fate. But to be fair, Twisted Fate dies a lot against a lot of decks, so it's not something to like rely on too much or play cards that basically only make sense with Twisted Fate, but without Twisted Fate are kind of underwhelming, like the discard units. Don't get me wrong, they are great now since they got buffed, but not in this deck. Also, once again, they are P&Z cards, so they make your Grifter worth. So you add a unit that draws a card, and at the same time decrease the chance of one of your better units that actually draws a card instead of loots to draw you the card. That also sometimes costs 1 less with Black Market Merchant and gets you random stuff you don't have access to that is randomly really good against your opponent. So yeah, just don't do it. So let's talk about the units. First we have Jagged Butcher. Jagged Butcher is actually really great. Like, some people started putting them in the deck at the beginning of the last balance patch, I think. Like in the very beginning, when the deck briefly did well and then kind of got stifled out from the Noxus aggro decks. That's, by the way, big reason why I think the deck is like much better now. The Noxus aggro deck was the most popular, and towards the end still the second most popular, or close first, ahead of Ash in popularity, and the matchup was just horrendous. Like, so bad you could basically not win. Like, the units outscale your removal. Stuff like Make It Rain just deals you damage with their disciples. They curve out hard. You have no way to stop a harrowing. So as soon as they draw a harrowing, like turn 6 or 7, they're just harrowing and you die, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you can't kill them fast enough. That matchup was just basically a nightmare, and a big reason why I hated the deck every time I tried it. But now this matchup got replaced with actually a really good matchup, the discard aggro decks. They have a lot of fragile units. You can just block and then clean stuff up, so the deck actually is really good at just dismantling the entire board the entire time while getting some chip damage in, and then eventually you just take over with like Rexes and stuff, and also outgrind them. Like, the discard deck actually grinds pretty well, but you grind even better. So yeah, and they also have limited ways to deal with the Twisted Fate, so sometimes he just sticks around, and if he levels, then that's game over too. So yeah, I've really liked the matchup against the discard decks. That makes a big difference. And then the matchup against Ash seems pretty solid to good from my experience so far. And it's great against other Ezreal decks like Ezreal Karma, because Rex is so retarded. So yeah, so far pretty happy with it. It's probably worse against like Shadow Isles control, so if War Mother gets really popular, I could see this deck becoming pretty bad. But yeah, other than that, I've been really liking it. Also liked it against like Demacia Scout stuff quite a lot, because you have so much cheap removal, and the Kex would Make It Rain, just obliterate their board and stuff. It's really hard for them to catch up. So the deck seems really well positioned going forward. So yeah, speaking of Butcher, Butcher is really great. If you have the Warning Shot, turn 1, 3/3, just stalls any 1-drop in the game basically that sees play right now. It's also really great offense, because like I said, the deck actually plays more like sort of a tempo aggro control type deck, where you really do a lot of beatdown while killing the opponent's stuff. You kind of control the board and pressure the opponent. That's how you win most of the time, and then you finish them with Rex. Or sometimes the last bit of damage with Ezreal, because the opponent's already below 10, and then even this deck's Ezreal can kill them if they're like in like 6 to 8 health range, for example. So yeah, you either hit the opponent to 16 in turn 1, or yeah, completely stall their early game, because most early game units right now just can't deal with a Butcher. There are some 2-drops like 3/2s that trade with the Butcher, but even that is fine. And also you can sometimes just handle those with Beam or Mystic Shot, or just trade with like a Deckhand or Black Market Merchant, stuff like that. It's also nice to, like, say turn 1, no attack token, go Warning Shot, Butcher, then on turn 2 you open attack with Butcher, unless the opponent wants to throw away Chump. They usually have to E3, which means you can play a Merchant as well for free on 2 with the Plunder trigger without needing another Warning Shot. But yeah, Merchant is still pretty solid. It trades. It's kind of comparable to, say, Avaros and Sentry. Needs a bit more setup, but then it draws you the card right away, and the card gets reduced in cost by 1, which is pretty strong. But it roughly fills a similar role as, say, Avaros and Sentry in similar decks. Deckhand, I've been going back and forth between 2 and 3. 2/2 is not the greatest stat line, obviously. The deck is a bit heavy on units, so I've considered stuff like a 3rd Warning Shot or a Parlay or something. And I've been playing with Parlay for a while, and that's pretty solid. It still lets you turn 2 Butcher or Merchant, or sometimes like Deckhand, Parlay for 2 on a 2-drop, stuff like that. It has been pretty solid, but it's a bit marginal, and I just decided to settle with the fact that the deck is just not going to be very good at like the post-leveled Ezreal game, so adding a Parlay over Deckhand is not going to change that fact, and then I probably rather have the 6th 2-drop, and the deck makes some good use of Make It Rain, of Keck with Make It Rain and Static Shock especially, but even with Mystic Shot it's pretty solid. And the thing is, sure, you can make Kecks with Petty Officer, but you really don't want to if you don't have to, so it's ideal to like get your Keck from Deckhand and then be able to use your Officer as a 1/1. And there are still sometimes situations where you just want to like double Keck, like turn 2, turn 3 Keck, for example, stuff like that. So I've been pretty happy with the 3 Deckhands, despite the 2/2 stat line sometimes being a bit awkward. And sometimes you want to let the opponent attack you on turn 2, take the damage, and then play Deckhand post combat so they can't kill the Keck, which can be awkward, but hasn't been like a real problem. So for now I'm just gonna stick with 3 Deckhand. Then Ezreal I basically already talked about. Petty Officer is great, provides Kecks, provides value, provides aggression. The deck does a good job of offense and defense with Officer, and the option between high rolling 1-drops or getting a Keck when you need one is another great opportunity. The card is just amazing. Then we have Twisted Fate. The deck is actually more of a Twisted Fate deck than an Ezreal deck in a way, because the deck is better at leveling and leveraging Twisted Fate than Ezreal. Sure, the leveling Ezreal part's not a problem, but the leveraging Ezreal is. And yeah, you want a blue card a lot. Every time you can afford to, you want a blue card. It's just really great. If the opponent kills it, you get value. It also makes it level up faster, since the deck is solid at leveling it up, but it isn't as good at leveling it up as some other decks, like for example the Fizz Twisted Fate deck in the past, because we don't have Pilfered Goods anymore. We don't have Pick a Card, we only have Salvage, which is a really expensive Pilfered Goods, and we don't have a replacement for Pick a Card. And our Yordle Grifter isn't as reliable at 11 PNZ cards. So it takes a little longer, but if the opponent can't handle him, he'll usually level after 2 or 3 turns, and then he'll just win you the game. Yordle Grifter, yeah, you need Warning Shots for your Rexes. This is a great enabler. Sometimes it also enables Merchant or Butcher. Warning Shots are solid for leveled Ezreal, and yeah, getting additional cards is great, especially if you have a Merchant out. So it's just a very solid unit, and it does some decent beatdown if you keep the opponent's board empty by killing it all. So in the end, anything that hits the opponent and doesn't cost you resources is great. And then we have the King of the Ring, the star of the deck, Riptide Rex. I think this is going to be one of the most powerful and format-defining cards in the new metagame. It already started to shape up that way before, and now with the balance changes and nerfs to the other stuff, it's even more primed to take over. There's no way you don't run 3 of this. The card is just insane, and even drawing 2 is insane. Like if the first Rex doesn't win you the game, the second one certainly will. Sometimes people can handle the first, but they can't handle the second. So if you go turn 8, turn 9 Rex, it's just game over. The card is so brutal, has so little counterplay. If they don't have a board, they take 7. If they have a board, they don't have a board anymore afterwards and take some damage. It's just, yeah, it's insane. The deck is more of a Riptide Rex deck than anything, really. You just kind of want to, like, grind out your opponent, keep control of the board, then you slam Riptide Rex and you completely take over the game. That's kind of how the deck mostly operates. Let's talk about the spells. There's basically a bunch of removal. Beam is great removal. Not much debate here. Like, I think you always run 3 of the card. The card is just good. Seen a list going around recently that has been playing 2. Don't do it. I don't think that's good. The card is still like your most flexible removal to deal with anything that could be problematic, especially bigger units. And it can also be like a really nice cheap removal, like turn 1, deal 1 against an aggro deck when you need it. It's even cheaper if you have a keg out. Like sometimes with a keg you can like 0 cost beam for 1 damage, for tempo, stuff like that. It's solid once you have Ezreal out for the leveling up, beaming for 0 and so on. Beam is just an all-star in Ezreal decks, really. Warning Shot is sort of throwing away a card, so you're down a card, which is why there are only 2. We don't have anything like Rummage to get rid of the extra copies, and the deck isn't quite as dependent on them as more proactive decks with Plunder, so that's why there are only 2. Make It Rain is great, additional Plunder enabling, great with the kegs, great to help control the board, just a very solid card in the deck that does a lot of things. Also, up to 3 level up triggers for Ezreal is amazing, obviously. Mystic Shot, just, yeah, additional removal, very solid, kills people, kills units, levels up Ezreal, does all the things, really. Salvage, the card's not great, but it's reliable, it's kind of like your deep meditation. Not a big fan of stuff like Pilfered Goods or Pick a Card in the deck. Problem with Pick a Card is it's only good with Twisted Fate, otherwise it's not very good. The deck's average casting cost is fairly high, so if you play it too early, you might just draw into more cards than you can play, or you even draw into a Rex that you can't play yet, or it's going to be your only play and the other 2 cards are going to be gone. Also, effectively, Pick a Card is still only a 2 for 1. You still only get 2 cards because you give up a card and the pick a card and you get 3 cards back, while Salvage draws you 2 cards for 1 card. So in one case you get 3 for 2, and in this case you get 2 for 1, which in the end both amounts to an effective 2 for 1. The thing is, you can play this anytime, it doesn't need any enabling, it draws you real cards from your own deck, it's hard card advantage, Pilfered Goods can draw you stuff that might not be that good for you, while Salvage always does, and yeah, all I really care about is like a solid draw 2 to make my resources flow and just kind of stay ahead and grind out the opponent. So yeah, Salvage, it's not hard, but it does the job and it does it reliably and consistently, while Pilfered Goods and Pick a Card both have much more issues in my opinion. So yeah, Pick a Card is not even a consideration, honestly, and I think Salvage is still overall better than Pilfered Goods, especially with only 2 warning shots, and you really need your warning shots for your Rex, so you don't want to have to be forced to spew them too much in games where you can't get damage in well, for your card draw as well. We already have like 9 cards that ideally want Plunder, so you really don't want to like tax your Plunder more than you have to. And yeah, drawing from your own deck, there's something to be said for drawing from your own deck in a deck where your card quality is so good, especially getting closer to your next Twisted Fate or your next Riptide Rex is a pretty big deal, or even chaining Salvages. So yeah, it kind of keeps the deck together despite being pretty unexciting. Static Shock, great with Ezreal, great with Twisted Fate, a bit clunky, and it's a PNZ card, so there are only 2. It's close, could see an argument for the 3rd, since obviously with Make It Rain they sort of get better rather than worse in multiples, all the ping effects. But yeah, it's kind of clunky, so it's virtually good with Twisted Fate because it draws a card, but it's also not that great with Twisted Fate because it's 4 mana for 1 Twisted Fate progress, and you really don't have issues leveling Ezreal, and it makes your Grifter worse. So I initially had 3 for a while, but went back to 2 again. But it's close. Couldn't fault anyone for like running 3 Static Shock really. It's a fine option. So yeah, those are the spells. And yeah, like I said, the deck plays quite proactively, kind of like tempo-y, aggro controlling in a cool way, which makes it even more enjoyable for me. But that also means its weaknesses are accordingly, which means against hard control you can have real problems. Something like Shadow Isles control. Before the balance patch, I actually faced an Anivia Braum guy and beat him, but it was pretty close and I was kind of lucky, and I can totally see that matchup being unfavorable. But once again, Rex is a pretty big star, so you kind of want to aggressively beat the opponent down and try to like get them with their back to the wall so they kind of just barely die. But they're probably a deck like that would probably be favored. Like that's usually the case with these sort of tempo-y aggro controlling decks that aren't really aggro, but so they are not aggressive enough usually to just completely overwhelm the opponent fast, and they are obviously not controlling enough to sort of win a fair fight against a grindy control deck that plays all the control bombs. And I suspect that to be the case here, unlike with something like Karma Ezreal, where true control decks are actually pretty good matchups. Or at least pretty solid matchups. Better than with this deck. My record right now is 27-9, but one 10-game set was a day or two before the balance patch, when the metagame already shifted in a way, where Noxus was on the decline, especially at the ranks that I was playing, and the deck became pretty well positioned. I went 7-3 in that set, so even without the 10 games from before the balance patch, just with the new patch, I am 26 with the deck, which is an amazing performance, and I'm currently sitting at rank 23 EU, and one more win, I think, if the win is 17 or more LP, will catapult us into rank 21 again, which is pretty nice. I'm above 1800 LP, so more than the rank 1 in NA basically, but even pretty good for Europe. Almost top 20, but only almost. Let's see if we can get at least to top 21. Top 20 probably. Top 20 has like more than 100-point lead to me, so we'll probably not manage that in the video. That will take us probably another stream or two. But yeah, video is getting pretty long. I think I talked about all of it. I think the main takeaway is this deck is fairly proactive, despite what you might think. So play for pressure, play for tempo, but don't throw away cards too aggressively. Just like get damage in where you can, when it doesn't cost you anything, and don't count too much on your Ezreal. This is not an actual Ezreal deck in the normal sense. Thinking that is kind of a trap. But yeah, deck is well positioned, lots of fun to play, really strong. Riptide Rex is a dump card. So yeah, let's get into the games. I'll see you in a moment with the usual 4-game video in High Masters.